Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and welcome to this first video in painting our new Black Templars project for the YouTube channel and the Patreon. So if you haven't seen the videos before, myself and Andy are going to be working on a slow grow, slow painted Black Templars army, where we can hopefully utilise all the Primaris kits, including those that come out for the various different chapters. We can convert them up and just start making a nice big gaming army that we can be proud of, but we can also get done fairly quickly, push it around the table, take it to events and just have some fun. And it's safe to say that this has got off to a fairly inauspicious start. So let's paint. So I wanted to choose a unit to kickstart this project, and in the end I settled on the Terminators, and that's for a couple of reasons really. They are effectively a test model, but rather than putting all that energy into a test model and then you're not really happy with it and it's not going to fit in with the rest of your army and blah blah blah, I thought let's do a whole unit and we can establish a nice simple template for the rest of the project. And by simple I mean the models don't need an awful lot doing to them. Now, they haven't got the tabards on. That's obviously the glaring thing that's missing that we'd include in quite a few Templar models. But that's not an issue. That's just one element. Everything else I can do on these Terminator models. They're a nice big canvas. They're pretty forgiving. And ultimately, they're some of my favourite models ever. You know, Terminators. I just love them. And I've always enjoyed painting them when I've done them for the channel or for myself. And these new ones are they're such a great size. Just the proportions and everything. I wanted something that was really exciting, really just keep me driven and keep me going. So with regards to prepping them, I didn't do loads. I scraped off and shaved off and sanded off most of the things like the aquillas and the different wing skulls and things like that on the model. I wanted to keep them a little bit cleaner and add detail like that using transfers. And then also I wanted to start adding some bonding studs like you can see me doing here. So this is using those rivets from Zinj Industries. And then I also wanted to try and learn how to do smaller rivets for things like the shoulder pads and whatnot. So modelling point of view, lots of fun, starting to build the character into them already. And as I said, there's not really any pressure on this squad because I think for me, a shooting Terminator squad's hardly like a headline unit for a Black Templars army. But they're lovely models, there's a ton of character to them, so I'd still be pleased to have them. And especially from a painting point of view, other than really setting things like the black and the white for the shoulders and stuff, I would also be able to play around with the tertiary colours, play around with the basing, and see it as a squad rather than just a single miniature, which I think is important. But things basically started going wrong from more or less the get-go. Here's an example of one. So we're going to use a little bit of plasticard here. So this is 0.5mm plasticard. I mentioned in the previous video 0.5mm foil. It was actually 0.15mm brass sheet that you saw me using in the previous video. So sorry if that confused anyone. But yeah, most of the time I think I'm going to use the plasticard because it's the exact same thickness as the existing purity seals. I've decided where they are shorter purity seals, like on the ankle we just saw then, I'm just going to leave them because they look good and there's nothing I can really add to them to make them more pleasing for me. But where we've got a bit more room or where they're going to feature on a banner and things like that, we can play around with them more. So I've clipped them off. I've just tacked in the plasticard there to get an idea of the length. Cut it off and then you can just carve it up a little bit and bend it and they look absolutely like the moulded plastic ones. What you should try and do is make sure you remove the backing sheet that is on your plasticard, which I didn't on this one, which is that blue stuff you can see. So that was an ominous, I should have spotted that really, but I didn't, and it was fine, and actually it took the paint and all the rest of it is nothing to worry about, but it does peel off, so something to be aware of. I picked up this sheet of plasticard from my local hobby shop. I think I got like 4 A4 size sheets of it for less than a tenner. So that'll last you just about all your purity seals that you'll ever make, I imagine. So yeah, so nice simple little tweaks we can start making just to make the models our own. And with regards to bending it and shaping it, you can see here I'm just using an old airbrush needle just to gently bend it around to put a little bit of movement into it. It's really, really not hard to do, and just a really easy way to personalise your miniatures, I think. And I have gone full on like method with this Black Templar stuff. Well, no, that's not true. I definitely haven't been going method with the Black Templar stuff. What I've been doing is doing a lot of reading, a lot of looking at art, going on Pinterest, looking at what other people have done and stuff for inspiration, particularly that Maxime Corbeil army. I just think it's brilliant. I mentioned it in the deciding on what to use video. So I was really raring to go with this. To attach it, it's really simple. We use plastic cement. It's attached. There's a good sort of mil or so contact area there on the bottom of his chest, and then I tack it in as well just above his groin. And here I'm using the extra thin Tamiya stuff just to almost pin wash that in, just to blend the little seams together. So it's really, really sturdy. And I think when the purity seals are on the bodies of the model, I'm going to be using this plastic art. I think I'm only really going to use the brass trim when I want them to be sort of exaggeratedly long, flowing from things like banners and maybe shoulder pads and stuff like that. So a really nice start. The decoration on his top, I snipped that off a captain model from Heresy, but I know maybe a laurel is perhaps captain, not sergeant, but I thought it was just a nice detail, and we are not going for accuracy so much when it comes to this army. This is much more inspired by artwork, inspired by stories, rather than trying to closely follow the rules, as it were, for how the chapters put together. This is one of the most fun parts, creating these rivets. Now I'm using something here called stamping foil, just aluminium foil, and you use a tiny little drill bit to press through onto a silicone pad, and you just stamp out all these little rivets. I'm not going to do an in-depth tutorial on this because this was the first time I tried it. And if there's ever anything like this that's sort of a military modelling technique, the channel I will always go to and research is called Night Shift, and I'll put a link to it down in the description. It's one of the only hobby channels that I personally subscribe to. I just think he's phenomenal. And there's so much stuff that he does that I think is applicable to our hobby as well, even though he's working on generally larger scale World War I, World War II kits. So I really do recommend you go and check him out. And this was where I found rivets. And this was the second stage where things went wrong, where, as you can see, my hair is in most of the shot. So we're forging on, but already things are not going as smoothly as they will often go on our videos. But it was really, really fun doing these rivets. If you're a meticulous person, you'll really enjoy it. I am not particularly meticulous, but I still had a lot of fun doing it. But it really is as simple as it looks. Cocktail stick, super glue, little rivets, and I guess eyesight to a degree. I have very good eyesight, but I can totally appreciate that if you don't, you might want to be using one of those magnifying headset things. You might find you have a better time doing this. But the aluminium foil that I bought, as I say, it's called stamping foil. Again, I bought a pack of, 4 or 5 A4 sheets of the stuff. I'll never get through all that. I'll be getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of rivets out of all that. Although I enjoyed this so much, I will be putting rivets on nearly everything that I possibly can. So here I had the squad assembled in its sort of sub-assemblies for painting. So I've separated the heads, kept the shoulder pads separate because they're both going to be white. Then the rest of the models are going to be black, obviously. So it's just a little bit easier to prime them and paint them initially separately. I've put a little blob of blue tack into the collar area of each model so that when I prime it and paint it, when it comes time to glue the heads in, I can just peel that blue tack off, and there'll be some bare plastic for the glue to adhere to properly. And with regards to pinning them, I'm just using some brass rod here. A lot of people just use paper clips, and rather than gluing it in, I've drilled the feet and I put a little bit of blue tack around the end and then shove that in the feet or the head or whatever, and that does a fantastic job of holding it really, really steady. But the bonus is when it comes time to pull the models off, you're not needing to break glue or anything like that, and I won't be pinning them to the base or anything, so I'll want to remove the pins. So for the armour colours, the actual painting itself, we had a little chat about things, and the white was one of the ones where we needed to decide what shadow colour did we want to put into the white. And we've chosen to go with Rakarth Flesh from Games Workshop. Now I'm going to be using an airbrush for these first few stages. I'm going to produce a guide for doing this scheme without the airbrush, for those of you that want to follow along and perhaps don't have access to one or can't use it. There's going to be an awful lot of material to support this project, because we would really love people to join in if they fancy it. But we chose Rakarth Flesh because we didn't want that sort of neutral grey, but we didn't want too much yellow in like a bone colour. So in the end, Rakarth was a really nice middle ground, and just gives the shadows something, but doesn't detract from anything else. And then the highlight, I'm just using Tamiya white here, and that's because it's my favourite airbrush white. Andy will probably brush paint his pads, he's already said, so he will use Rakarth Flesh again to base coat, but he will use something like an AK white or a Vallejo white to brush paint up those highlights from. And that really doesn't matter that we're going to use some different brands for that, because ultimately the whole thing goes together. And if you know the reasons that we've chosen, the colours we've chosen, you should be able to follow along fairly well, I hope. The models I've primed matte black using the Colourforge stuff, and I'm just going over here with Vallejo model colour black, just tidying it up any areas that I've missed with the can. This is, you can see there on the leg, sometimes when you're priming you don't always hit those crevices, so it's quite handy to go back in if you can with the airbrush, or go in with the brush, or just give it a slightly heavier prime and you'll be fine. Now the first highlight we're going to go for is Corvus Black by Games Workshop, or Raven Black if you want to use the rattle can from Colourforge. This is going to be fairly broad highlights. Now I've thinned this paint about 3 drops of thinner for every drop of paint. I'm spraying at about 25 psi, and I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle. In this I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Signature Series Infinity, and you can see particularly here on the top as the paint goes on wet, you can see how broad those highlights are. I'm not worrying hugely about directional light sources here, just thinking what's the sort of best pose, and have the light coming from above and slightly to the side on the front, and then repeat the same on the back for just how we'll make the shapes look most interesting. And this Corvus Black, it isn't a particularly dramatic first highlight, and I don't know if you can see here on the video, I've tried to capture it. I have had a mould slip, I think it is, on this plastic kit. I've never experienced this before. It's definitely not a mould line, it's a full-on slip in the part. And it's very, very peculiar, but hopefully you can see here the difference. On the left there we've got that Corvus Black highlight on, and on the right it's just that black base coat. With regards to where to put your highlights as well, black's great because you can see the highlights shining when you've got your painting lamp on it, so you're kind of just following them. Then for the final airbrush highlight I'm going to use Eshin Grey, and this was because I just wanted to push it a touch further, a little bit brighter. Again, thinned the same pressure and all the rest of it, and I'm painting it in all the same areas. I'm just covering a smaller portion of those areas. And I'm really pleased actually with how the black and the white have come out on this. So whilst I might sound a bit dejected or start catastrophizing as this video goes on, there are elements of it that really did go to plan. And I'm really pleased. I've also focused those highlights you can see there on the sort of collar and head area, just because that's where we want to try and draw focus on the miniature. So I think that looks, to be honest, I think it looks lovely. I think it's quite subtle, but I think it's interesting, and I think it still reads as black, which is what's important. You see the one on the right there, that's just got the Corvus highlight on it. Now, if when you do your Eshin highlight, you go a little bit too broad with them and the model starts to look perhaps grey rather than black, you can always go back in and redefine the areas of shadow on the miniature. So his butt plate here is a good example. That's almost all grey there. And whilst it is a very shallow curve, so it would have quite a broad highlight on it, it's not as broad as that. So I've loaded up a Black Legion here, which is one of the newer contrast paints. It's a black ink basically. It's really, really strong. So I've thinned it with a little bit of Vallejo airbrush thinner, this one is, and 1-to-1ish, something like that. Just thinned it a little, and I'm just going to go in here and aim into the shadows and use the sides of the brush, as it were, the cone of paint that's coming out of the brush, just to trim the highlight a little bit. and just help redefine some of those shapes. And if you haven't got your airbrush, you can absolutely go in and do this with your brush. It's just going to take a little bit longer. We're really keen with this project. Like, whilst we're competent with airbrushes and we enjoy using them, they're not essential to achieving what we've got here for the Black Templars. Certainly the infantry models. I think they will come into their own a lot more on the vehicles, but certainly on the infantry models you can follow with a rattle can and a brush. And I say I will be doing a tutorial for you to follow along with that. Then for the chipping or the edge highlighting, it's going to serve the same purpose. I've used Mechanicus Standard Grey here, and that's because it's got a little bit of blue to it, and I really liked that when I've looked at other people's, say particularly Maxime's. I really like that blue. Actually, that on the Terminator box set, you'll see there's a Black Templar on there, and I enjoyed that slightly blue-grey highlight on them. So it's just a case of working all the way around, just tapping the edges where I think you'll get damage. And I'm not doing every single edge by any means. This isn't traditional edge highlighting. This is using battle damage in a similar way to sort of help define the different panels. So I focused it on areas that I think will receive more and in areas where I would like to draw attention. So you can see there I also used a sponge on areas like his fist just to increase the amount of chipping. But I don't want to use a sponge all over because it's quite messy and it's not the most accurate of tools. But I think if you use it judiciously, you'll be absolutely fine. And then for the white, we just use a white and repeat the process. And then for both the black and the white, we're going to use Rhinox hide here. And we're going to cover much, much smaller areas than we did with the grey and the white. But this is just to represent a little bit of the corrosion that's happening due to those chips and stuff that have happened on the battlefield. I say there's no specific style that we're going with for this. It's just pleasing to us. So there's going to be elements of military modelling painting. There's going to be elements of a more illustrative style of painting. There's going to be elements that are sort of budget heavy metal, if you will. You know, there's lots of different ways that we're going to approach painting it just to make it pleasing for us. Now I'm going to go in and start bringing a little bit more life to areas of the armour, and starting with the white, I'm going to use a technique you may have seen me use in previous videos called oil dot filtering or oil paint rendering. There's various different names for it, dot filtering, but this is a technique that I really, really enjoy doing, and I think it's particularly effective on the white here. And I'm really very happy to say that I've been asked to do an article on this technique, or my interpretation of it and how I use it when I'm painting things like the Terminator model here, for a project by a friend of ours, Helio. We've known Helio for 4 or 5 years now, and you'll know that we don't tend to partner or do collabs with very many people. Essentially we won't do it unless we really like the people and like what they're doing, but he had asked us a while ago about doing something for this book he wanted to create, called it Miniature Painting Made Easy, and at the time there was an awful lot of commitments going on with the channel and things like that, and I wasn't able to do it. Andy's done a fab Eldar one for book 1 in that series, and you know, I was a bit miffed that I wasn't going to be able to get the time to do it. But thankfully, the project has gone amazingly well over on Kickstarter for him. I'll pop a link down in the description if you want to go and check that out. It is an affiliate one, so if you click on that, he'll know you've come from us to get it. But don't worry about that too much. Go and check it out. It's essentially a series of books now, and because it's done so well, it's now up to 3 volumes of just a ton of articles by some. I mean, there are some really great names, really painters I really admire in that series, as well as just a bunch of sort of normal hobbyists in there that just really enjoy explaining what they've been doing. And and essentially Hello said, look, will you do an article to do with the oil dot filtering? I really like it when you use it on things like your Titans and the Knights and stuff like that, and the Votam. And I was like, yeah, go on, because there is time to do it now, and it's something I do feel quite passionate about. So yeah, thanks very much to Helio for giving me that opportunity, and I'll be painting up another Terminator model, I think, for the book, but we're going to really delve into a little bit more about how we can play around with this, what colours we choose, why we will choose them, and so on and so forth. But as I say, if you like books, if you like collections of really nicely put together hobby articles, it's probably worth checking out. As I say, myself and Andy won't just do stuff with anyone. Like, Helio's a good dude. This is a fun project. So here you can see me putting the dots of the oil on the pads, and then just using a brush that's just damp with mineral spirits, just blending them together, trying to always do the same direction, up and down as I move across the panel. And what it does is it just slightly discolours the panel, introduces all these sort of little streaks and nuances to it. And you'll notice there I'm going in with the brush just to clean up over the transfer as well. The transfers were a flipping nightmare on this model. I used some of the new sheets from the upgrade kits and the boxes of Templars, and they just I had to strip the models. That was a pretty low point in this project, getting up to more or less this stage, and then just having to strip the models because the transfers had gone so poorly. And it's frustrating because there were transfers I'd used on there from different sheets and different manufacturers, and they had worked absolutely fine. So I was confident, it wasn't my application of them. So yeah, real shame there with that, but it is what it is. I tried some dot filtering on the black, and it didn't really give me the effect I was after for this. All I really wanted to do here was introduce a little bit of red into the black, and the dot filtering, as I said, it gave an interesting finish, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And in the end, I just went with a normal filter, as it were. So I just put together a red oil wash there, and just applied it over the model, fairly thin wash, not too heavily applied, so it didn't sit too much in recesses. It's just given that black armour a lovely little red tone, particularly in the shadows, which was precisely what I was after. For the little crux terminatus, I've just started off with Skaven Blight Dinge, and I've added in Rakarth Flesh to lighten it up, to create the highlights. This is, it's all starting to go wrong at this point. I wasn't over the moon with how that looked. I've tried to give it a shadow brown wash here, just because it doesn't. It's just not the right grey, basically, that I've chosen for it. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board for the grey on that one. I need something with more brown in it. I need something that's a bit warmer, and I will delve into my bin bag of grey paints to do. Now, I was just about getting over the transfer thing, and I started painting the lenses in here, for which the majority of the footage is unusable, because either my hair's in it or it's out of focus. So I'm not going to bore you with a badly put together clip on painting the lenses. I will ensure that is covered in the next video on these Templars, because I do like the colour, the yellow lenses, like that artwork from John Blanche. Now, this is something that did go really well, and I'm really, really pleased with it. The purity seals, and that's kind of important. I'm using a base coat of US Olive Drab, and then you see here I start adding Karak Stone into that mix and just highlighting them, or basically painting them, just using tons and tons of these little strokes going in the same direction. I did this on a recent model for the Leviathan release, and I really liked how it came out. And at the moment, this is how I like doing purity seals. I don't write any of the text in, because I think all those little dashes, I think, give the idea that there is a lot of fine text written onto them. That might change. It almost certainly will change, possibly during this project, but it'd be very easy for me to go back in here and apply some text if I want to. But at the moment, as I say, this is a look that I like. And for the purity seal itself, the stamp, I've just used Barak Nar Burgundy, mixed in a little Rakarth Flesh to highlight it, and it's done. So really happy actually with how the purity seals have come out. It's quite nice watching the video back, doing the audio, because I thought the entire thing was a complete disaster, but actually there's definitely elements of this scheme that I am very happy with. And not only the idea of them, but I think the execution of them as well. Now for the gold, base coating it using Decayed Metal. You notice I've used Games Workshop paints for the majority of this, and that's partly because I would like you guys to be able to follow along, and I know that Citadel paints are very easy to get hold of for most people, but there's certain paints that are just worth having from other brands, and they're worth hunting out. And Decayed Metal, in my opinion, is one of those, by scale 75. I've base coated the gold with it, and now I'm highlighting it using Runelord Brass, not using gold here, because I want a really old gold, faded sort of gold. And then one of my favourite things to do with gold is to give it a coloured wash. In this case, I'm going to use green. This is Dark Angel's green contrast. I've heavily thinned this with water on my palette to create a wash, and I will just apply it as many times as I need to get the effect I would like. And then just to bring back a little bit more warmth to that gold, I've gone in and used Skullcrusher Brass here by Games Workshop. Citadel metallic paints that have a white lid on them, they're really good generally, I think. So yeah, if you're ever wondering about them, they're good to work with. Now at this point, I needed a bit of a boost, so I glued the heads in and discovered that I had painted the white dot highlight on the lenses too far up, and they all looked like they were staring in opposite directions like a bunch of chameleons. So I could basically cry at this point. This was I had to sit down, have another cup of tea, and think, what am I going to do with this? Because it's starting to run away with me, this project. It was getting in my head. I was questioning everything about it. So I thought, right, I need to take one of these to completion and just get an idea of if I'm on the right track here, or if actually I need to just start again. So I've gone in, I've taken a brown wash, Shadow Brown, it's another Abtalung 502 paint, pin washing this over all of the metallics, which are just burnt iron by Vallejo Metal Colour Series, and I'm just giving them a wash of that brown. And then I'm going to use an orangey wash here. I'm using dark rust and light rust as a mix, but you could use, burnt sienna and burnt umber, something like that mixed together, just a browny orange colour. And I'm going to mix that up with some mineral spirits into a wash and just start pin washing the black armour with that, because we're going to have the basing colour be that wonderful sienna and ochre and colours that John Blanche did in his amazing artwork that we've based this off, which we talk about a lot in the previous video. I'm just going to pin wash this in here a bit to give me an idea, because as I say, I needed something here. It was at this point where I wasn't even sure if I was going to put a video out this week on them, because quite frankly I'm embarrassed by how it's come out, but we have a duty, a commitment, an obligation to you guys to produce this stuff, because of all that support you give us over on Patreon, which we're incredibly grateful for. And also, you might as well be honest, right? Sometimes projects don't always go the way you want them to. I've done the shield there. It's not right. I definitely need a warmer yellow. And the basing is almost there. So I'm going to do a separate video on creating the bases, because it's about 75% of the way where I want it. And I actually think it's worth a little video on its own. And I'm quite looking forward for this Templar series of producing not just sort of full-length half-hour tutorials and stuff. Like if there's an element that I think's interesting, I'm just going to drop another video on it, even if it's only sort of 5 minutes long, as I'm working through the various models and characters for the army. Once those oil washes were dry, really important stage, I think, if you want to elevate your models a little, that's to go back in after you've washed your metallics with a lighter highlight, just to bring back a little bit of the shine. So I've based up I've used some pigments on the base there to sort of more or less emulate the colour, but as I say, I'm going to cover the base in its own video. And I just needed to get him done, because as I say, I was on the phone to Andy at about 10 o'clock at night. I think I've been up since about 5:30 in the morning working on this, trying to get these right, and it was just a disaster in my opinion, because they do not look like how I intended them to, and I have found it very difficult to put my finger on why that is, particularly as I'm watching this back and going, do you know what, the black armour is exactly how I want it, the white, it's exactly how I want it. The gold, I think, is really nice. Actually, the first time I've used this gold recipe, I'm actually really happy with it. So those fundamental elements, actually, of the Templars and the Purity Seals, those fundamental elements have actually come out just as I want. It's the things around them that perhaps I haven't achieved it. So I thought the best way I could do it was look at this as if someone else had presented it to me and asked for some feedback on it, or some critique, and how we'd try to look at it as dispassionately, as possible, and as honestly as possible. Because, like I say, things don't always go right when we're working on our own projects, right? It's just usually if they don't, you don't then have to stick them up on YouTube and show people about them. But yeah, so the black arm, very happy with that. I don't think the silver quite works. I think it is nearly there. I don't think it quite works. I'll be brutally honest. I think if I want to elevate this model slightly, I actually just need to spend more time on it. And I think I may have got into such a habit with painting these army painting or speed painting tutorials for YouTube that I think I'm losing that ability to just take a breath, allow a project a bit more time if it needs it. And that was kind of the whole point with this Black Templars one, was to give it that breathing space, to elevate it, that element, that little bit more. I also don't want to come across like a fool here and be saying, oh, this model looks crap, it's really, whereas some people might think, oh, that looks really nice, I'd really like to paint like that. It's simply that it doesn't look like how I had hoped it would look like, and that's why it's frustrating for me. So I'm going to take a couple of days off the Templars. I'm going to paint some stuff for next week, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to stop reading Black Templars novels as well. I think I just need a full couple of days off. I've got some classes I'm teaching this weekend, really looking forward to. But then Monday morning, first tea break, I'm going to be back on it, and I'm going to be analysing what's gone wrong. I'm going to be putting it right, and I'm going to be coming back with a video with a squad and a character where I feel that I've at least 90% nailed what I was looking for. As I say, really useful watching this back, because I don't think it's as far away as I actually thought when I sat down to record the video for you guys. So thanks ever so much for staying with me during this one. I hope the tutorial parts that worked were useful, and I hope just hearing about when things don't go right, maybe, we just want to be honest with you guys. We're not gonna sugarcoat things. I don't think it's what you expect from us, and yeah, we're gonna try and maintain that. So let me know in the comments if you like where this is heading. Let me know if there's some elements or you've got some suggestions that you think could elevate it or would bring everything in line with what we've talked about in the previous videos. We hugely appreciate all the support you guys give us. So if you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.